Hey, Thomas Bart here with another video for the Artisan Sound channel. In this video, which is a follow-up on the QLab automation setup for West Side Story, for our West Side Story production, I want to show you two interesting cases. And the problem here, or the question is, how to run two sound cues, two music cues, consecutively without editing them together into one file. So a lot of times the simple solution is to just edit them together in one file. And I'm doing that frequently. For example, right here, Q13 through 13C, when we look at the waveform here, well, it's not really that visible easily from the waveform, but you can see here, I spotted the starts of the actual cues, 13A. So 13 starts at the beginning, 13A starts right at 45 seconds, 13B, transition to Scherzo, starts at 118, 13C, the Scherzo itself, starts at 155. And so these are all edited together into one single sound file that looks like this. Now, when we come to the next cue, 13D, that is a little bit tricky because the way this works musically is that at the very end of this sound cue, I have the audio actually shared this time, so I actually be able to hear the soundtrack here when I'm playing this. This is how it ends. It ends on this B, French horn B right here. That gives the girl that is going to sing somewhere the initial starting pitch. So then she starts singing a cappella somewhere, and then this next cue starts, this one right here. Okay, so the easy way to do this is to just simply start this one manually. So, but it would have to be timed just exactly right. And I figured out a solution that I think is better than that. And that is, we're basically timing. There is an internal timing to this. And if you do this right, if you rehearse it right, then I think it can be reliably done in a way where the girl can start singing and the next cue starts, and it's always going to start at the same time, and it's actually going to lead to a more reliable way of the finding the tempo for the girl. So my thoughts on this, the solution that I figured out is this. So I want to have it like this. As soon as they hear the French horn note, they breathe in and start singing. And somewhere, okay, that's where the next music comes in. And it turns out that that is exactly a second. If we start this, the next cue here, exactly a second after this cue, it comes out to be a very organic tempo that is delivered from the last musical actions that happen in here. And so the girl just needs to musically continue to think in this same type of tempo vein and start singing. So now then the question is, how do we do that without editing this on the tail end of this sound wave here, of this sound file? Because I do want to have flexibility to just see, you know, if it doesn't work that way, then I'm just going to uncouple this and have it done manually, have this cue triggered manually by the QLab operator. But I think it's going to work. And so there is a way in QLab to make it so that this next cue will automatically play after this cue is done. And since this wave cue is not the previous cue to this cue, since we're kind of dealing in groups here, we have to refer with this feature to the group. Okay, this here is the big group that controls everything that happens during these 3 or 4 cues here. And then this here is the somewhere cue, that's 13D. And so that's the next group, you see. So here you can see in the hierarchy of groups is here. You can see the indented or inserted, or indented is the right word, I guess. Indented groups are here. So these are groups that are inside this group. They're subgroups. And then right here, when you come back out to the outer left bound line here, that's going to be the next group. So we want to accomplish that this group comes right, starts playing right after this group. And then if we need some extra time offset, we can put that in here into the start of the actual sound file of the somewhere cue. And so that's what I did it. Now, the way that this is done in QLab is, I find this rather unintuitive, because let me see how this, yes, okay, so the strange thing is that whatever happens to the next cue is set in the cue that is kind of the master of this cue following it, right? So the cue, in other words, the feature is called auto follow, and you would intuitively, I would think that you set this up on the cue that you want to auto follow the previous cue, but that's not how it's done. So it's there's here a continuation feature, and the continuation feature on the cue that you're setting always refers or concerns the following cue after that. Okay, so that means if you want this cue to automatically start after this cue is finished, you have to set that up in the initial cue that you're starting manually. You have to put this continue value here to auto follow. There are 3 values in here. Do not continue is the default, the normal way. That means the next cue needs to be started manually. And then there's auto continue and auto follow. There are some small semantic differences in what they're doing, but auto follow is the way to do it. Okay, so you set auto follow, and then the next cue just starts automatically right at the time that is set here as the duration of this cue. And so I figured that it's exactly 1 second after that this cue has to start to come in exactly into the timing that I want, right? So that's one way of solving how to consecutively play 2 music cues that are not in the same sound file. You see what happens is when I hit go on this group, what happens is that the locator here, that white arrow, that jumps to the next cue after this one, because it gets ready, it arms the next cue that requires operator input. Okay, so that's a good thing that there's no confusion. Even I marked this here big in a way that makes it clear to the QLab operator that they're actually not supposed to interact with this cue, because it'll automatically follow this one. And you can see here what happens when I press go. You see it skipped this one, and now the white arrow is ready and aimed on the next cue after that, right? So it's pretty clear for the QLab operator. And yeah, so that's one solution. The other solution, and there's not really a super big preference or difference in the way that I would really use them. But here's the other solution, the taunting scene. The taunting scene is pretty complicated, because the guys are turning on a jukebox that plays mambo music. So it's essentially the mambo cue that plays here in the taunting jukebox. And the reason why we're not editing these 2 audio cues together is because we're going to end up playing this taunting jukebox music out of a different audio output, so that we can make this sound more like source music. We're actually going to place a speaker inside a jukebox, or hook it up so that the actual prop or a set piece that is the jukebox will actually play, that music will be actually playing out of the jukebox. So in other words, this music file needs to be routed to a different output than this music file, which is score, that goes through the regular sound system. All right, so that's the reason why these cues can't be in one file in this case. And turns out they also need to be kind of triggered in exactly in a precise way of following each other. And in this case, the way I worked this one out is there is a way at the very end of the jukebox cue where the next cue is supposed to start. And the way there's a little bit of an intricacy here, because the way this cue ends is it's kind of strange. I'll let you hear it. So you can see here, the very ending is unfortunately kind of chopped off. There's a super quick fade before the next downbeat would happen. So it goes bum-ba-dum, 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 bum. Here's the next downbeat. And this is technically where the other cue should start. However, because this short fade here ends before this downbeat and would leave a little air gap here between the two music cues, I tried to sync it to that, but I wasn't happy with how this sounded, just because it always sounded like an accident, just because there's this air gap in here that is apparent if you start the other cue where it's supposed to start. And so I decided instead to start the other cue right here on this third bum-ba-dum. So bum-ba-dum, bum-ba-dum, bum-ba-dum. Right here, I'm going to start the other cue, and it takes over. It's going to be a very blended experience anyway, because this cue here is playing out of the jukebox, and then the other cue is coming in as score. So it's going to be sonically completely separate, and it's just more of a feel of the score taking over, although the other cue does take over kind of this similar groove into the score music. So it's designed to come in right in time and kind of continue the way that this cue here times the rhythm. Okay, so anyway, so that's how so basically I set this up just like so I'm not using auto follow on this one, but I set up the second sound cue right here, this one. I set this up in exactly the same way as I showed you with all these recall MIDI cues, with all the MIDI cues, that I simply put a time offset, and this offsets here. So that means I created a subgroup in the bigger group that is the taunting scene. The taunting scene is what starts the jukebox. It also sets the microphones for when the jukebox starts playing. And then the subgroup here is what essentially starts the score, and it also reconfigures the mic input settings as well. So that means this subgroup has an offset that tells us exactly when this cue is going to start, and this offset is precisely timed to this location right here. I discovered one cool thing is that it's kind of like strange that the time code isn't right here for where the yellow line is, but you can actually see that right here. So that's another cool thing, right? So 122.26, I put that in here, and that starts the score in exactly even an overlapping way in this case. So that's, I guess, that's the reason why I didn't use auto follow on this one. Although there's also another way to do that with auto continue. That's kind of what the auto continue is for in that pop-up box. But I find it easier and cleaner kind of to do it this way. So that's what I wanted to show you in this short video. It's kind of very intricate, I suppose. But yeah, that's what it comes down to when you want to make things, You may want to make solutions, find solutions for complicated situations. And I always prefer to automate things over leaving them to be done by an operator. The main reason for that is that I like it to be reliably always the same, unless there is a creative element that can actually be handled by the operator and is desirable over it being always the same way. But in these two cases that I showed you, I think that in both of these cases, the reliable way that creates a solution that is ideally always the same is preferable over a creative way. I suppose you could argue on the start of somewhere, but I think the way that performances get reliable, in my experience, is that if you have a track that you practice the timing with, it's going to be very reliable if the timing that you're practicing is musically optimal. Okay, if that makes sense. So that's why I prefer to create stable solutions that are musically optimal over improvised solutions that obviously are not optimal. They might come out optimally every now and then, but most of the time they lead to hesitation and some form of anxiety on the part of the performer because they're not 100% sure that the music cue is going to play as expected. And that's particularly the case when they just have to sing something, start to sing a cappella and rely on the operator to fire the cue when they need it, when they need to hear it. But it's also generally a problem when frequently the singer has to sing a pickup note and or just breathe and start singing on the beat of the music, and the music just starts right there. And typically, it's much more difficult to get that to be reliable between the interaction between the operator and the singer than if it's automated and the singer can rely on it that way. And again, this is not something that is just going against the operators, but it takes a lot of trust on the side of the singer to really take the risk of singing without hearing something. And that trust has to be built by being an operator that is extremely reliable in all the rehearsals. So if you have even a small amount of misfires during rehearsal time, every time that happens, it breeds a little bit more distrust is a big word for that, maybe too big, but it breeds a little bit more uncertainty on the side of the singer, and that just translates into hesitation in performances. And so therefore, I think that automated solutions that are musically optimized are preferable because of that. All right, well, there you have it. This is your little Sunday morning sermon. Have fun with it, and if you like the video, please like it. If you want to comment, please comment. If you have any questions, please ask them as well in the comments. This is Thomas Bartke signing out. See you next time.